Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show this week is the December edition of AI Pulse. I guess we could also call that the final edition of the year. And actually, it is nearly the end of season 3. So it's definitely the last AI Pulse we'll do in season 3. So, exciting. And as always, joined by my co-host, Tom Pringle, Director of Pilot Research. Tom. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not going to go back through the latest news, although maybe we should, at the beginning, maybe we should touch on the new models, because I don't know if you've been playing with them some, but I have, and I definitely have some observations there. But other than that, we're not going to hit on news this time. We're going to actually pull out some predictions from both of us. I know that I've done a show earlier on the report that I wrote on agentic AI predictions, but I think we can pull out a few that are particularly important and talk about those. And then I know, Tom, you've been thinking about this and have a few exciting predictions that you want to share as well. So,
well, that's probably an overstatement when you use the word exciting, but I'll take it. Let's see what we get to.
I mean, it's always exciting just to see what we come up with. I don't know.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right. Well, so let's start with the models, because
Sure.
this has been a hot topic, and we talked about this in our last show in November. At that time, I guess both Gemini had brought out Gemini 3 Pro and also Nano Banana, which is their image engine, and then Anthropic had released Claude 4.5, and we had a code red from OpenAI. I like saying that. I don't know why. Code red from OpenAI, and they rapidly came up with 5.2 model that is supposedly their answer to these. Because frankly, I had been using both. All three of these models regularly, as you know, and I had tried for a while on OpenAI to have it make these cover images I do for the blog, and I'd gotten it finally to the point where it was okay. It didn't misspell the title every time, which is kind of useful. But then I tried it in Google 3 Pro or Gemini 3 Pro Nano Banana, and it's an infinitely better image engine upgrade than I would have ever guessed, and I'm completely sold on how much of an improvement it was. And then, of course, I use Claude a lot anyway, and so 4.5 I thought was a big jump. I've had really good results using it as a research assistant, and yeah, so it's interesting though, and I did play with 5.2 a little bit. They're definitely, it's faster, it's way faster. But the one thing that that happened with, I don't remember which version. I'll say it was 5.1, but it might have been the one before. That it started being really strange about asking for more and more and more and more and more instructions. And I think I mentioned this to you before. It was so frustrating because you would define a prompt and then it would come back and go, well, yeah, but what about this, this, and this? Just tell me 1, 2, or 3. I would, and it would go, okay. And then what about this? Just tell me A, B, or C. Okay, I told you that. I like 25, 30 minutes later, I finally just prompted it going, would you just make the damn image, please?
Well, I mean, it's sort of trying to be helpful, Michael, and it just
it wasn't helpful.
Missed the mark very slightly. No, there's been. I mean, I think I've been using the new Gemini models. I do have to have a giggle every time I say Nano Banana. I don't know who came up with that.
I know too. I don't know why, but it is funny.
And then the new Claude models. It's interesting. I found myself, and this might be a function of where I spend more of my day, more in the Gemini stuff. But I think that probably speaks a little bit to the, I'm a workspace user and I don't always think even to switch tabs. And remember that thing we talk about between switching applications in IT? There's a degree of that. But then my still favorite game to play is setting what a task, setting and then setting the other one the same task and give it the answer that the first one gave, and seeing what the second one makes of the first one's answer, and so on and so forth. I find it's quite entertaining, quite amusing. I don't really have a use case generating images at the moment, other than I think I mentioned this last time. My superhero was not very me. I was happy to take, I was very happy to take the upgrade, but it definitely didn't really look like me. And I suppose that just speaks to the fact that I'm not a superhero.
Really good
So
though. I mean, it looked nice, so I don't know.
sure, we'll go with that.
It did look like you'd been at the gym maybe a little more than you have been lately, but
Well,
I don't
little more the gym, some different hair, less white hair here.
know.
It's all good. It's all good. 10 out of 10 for imagination. And imagination is probably better than hallucination. Just saying. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's just been it's been a conclusion to the year in terms of what we've seen. I think they've become a lot slicker. But it's interesting as we kind of tail into that conversation about predictions. Well, we'll get there in a second, but I do have some thoughts on where this is all going in terms of the world of large language models. Of course, I might be completely wrong. In fact, I probably am, but I'm very happy to discuss it.
Well, so when I did the predictions this year, I came out with a new framework to use because I always have a problem with, like, I know there's some things that I see and I go like, oh, I know these are going to happen next year because they're kind of already in motion, and then
Hmm.
I go like, these are just kind of interesting, but maybe they're not really moving yet. And then there's that category of, boy, I wish this would happen sometime in the next 5 years, but who knows? And so I came up with three tiers. I came up with the gonna happen for sure, probably happen in the next 2 years, and who knows?
Now, are you going to publish this list in a way that people can track
I
it
did.
over the time? Oh, nice.
I
I
did.
like it.
I did. I did. I published both the CX trends and the AI, agentic AI trends in probably more detail than I should have, along with a shortened presentation so you could, consume them in in some amount of time that would be reasonable. And then if you need the long version, you can, go look that up too. They're both there. So anyway,
Favorite GPT to summarize it.
yeah, actually, that'd be kind of a weird cycle to use one to research, to write it, to make it long, to make it short again. I mean, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, no, indeed, indeed. So, well, okay. So then you've got to tell me, and I didn't create any spoilers for myself. I have not read your AI predictions for this coming year. So maybe gives me the number one that gets you most like, oh, this is cool. It's going to happen.
Yeah, well, here's one that and this one won't be a surprise because I've mentioned this a few times. One of the issues, and this is an agentic AI trend, but it also showed up in my CX trends because it has a big impact on CX. That's this idea of enterprise memory, or persistent memory is how
Hmm.
I sort of like to think of it. And I mentioned before that it used to be really frustrating with the language models when you're using them just in the standard publicly available, the three we mentioned before mostly, and perplexity to some extent. Of course, it's using one of the others, but is that it forgot everything every time you dealt with it, right? It's just so really frustrating. And over the last 6 months, they've dramatically improved that idea of memory to the point now, from a Claude's perspective at least, absolutely, one of the most useful changes that I've seen with it this year is that it maintains that conversation that we've had in an ongoing way so that it retains memory of some of the things that we've talked about or worked on before. Particularly useful with my book because it has access, and obviously I use it as a research assistant for the book, and then it has access to all of those conversations and it remembers them. And now if I go in, I can just go, when we were working on chapter X, I I came up with this one idea, and I was thinking about writing a blog post about that. Can you give me an outline based on what we wrote before? So that kind of thing, it sounds silly, but it's just extremely valuable. Um, and then if you think about that in an enterprise context, particularly in CX, but across other functions as well. how important would it be, and how much of an improvement would it be in a customer experience perspective for the chatbot to be able to recall what you've done with the company, what transactions are there, what tickets you've filed in the past, whatever. That would be a game changer from an experience
Hmm.
perspective.
Agreed. No.
Check.
I've
Next.
so well, let's dig into that one a little bit deeper. So, I mean, yes, exactly. I totally see it. How it's interesting to me, and look, you may not have the answer to this, but how do you put guardrails or walls around that so that I don't start recalling? Let's say I call up uh, big company X, who I'm a regular customer of, or chat with them on their website, and they start referring to the Michael Fauscette history of purchases, which might be radically different to my own. Uh, how do you kind of, because it's interesting, because there's a lot of safeguards you've got to think in terms of, we're back into a bit of debate about kind of retrieval augmented um, generation, so the RAG stuff as well. Where does all that sit?
Hmm. So here's the simple answer, and the longer answer is considerably more complicated. But the idea, I think, is that we have to evolve the way we think about these agents a little bit. So in the past, we've talked about agentic as autonomous entities, right? You give them a goal, they process, they learn, they plan, they execute, etc. Now we know in real life they're not always being deployed in a fully autonomous way. So that's
Sure.
the first part of that. But the second part of that is, and actually Salesforce did this with some agent force announcements this year at Dreamforce. The idea that agents are probabilistic and have this ability, agency to make decisions and plan and design their own way of approaching that problem that you gave them, or the goal that you gave them, right? But the truth is that's not always what you want. You do mostly want them to have that capability, of course, but there are times when you don't want them to step outside of certain boundaries. I
Hmm.
mean, it could be simple things like you've seen in the language models, like you can't go tell it to, you know, do a video of your prime minister shooting the US president. Like it won't do that. Like it just
Unfortunate
says no.
example, but yes, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Well, so there are some deterministic things that you need. So what they did in Agent Force, and this is still evolving, of course, but they gave you a scripting language that lets you build those guardrails into the agent. So, and I think this is where where you're going to see all of these go. There is a certain level of, here's what I want it to do that is agentic, or can be autonomous, and then here are the boundaries. Don't go beyond these boundaries. Like don't publish customer data to the open web.
Makes
Simple,
sense.
right?
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
So I think that's what you'll see with this. And the way that, there's a bunch of things evolving underneath that, because for example, you've got you've got, retrieval augmented generation, RAG type implementations that let the model bring in, retrieve information from a knowledge store of some sort, of vector database or whatever, that is provided by the company and doesn't leak into the foundation model, right? So you want a barrier between that. So you're already seeing that start to evolve a bit, and I suspect that will, as we move more and more into this, agents that have the capability to remember will also have the capability to build those guardrails in place that prevent leakage or
Yeah,
other activities.
yeah. It sounds like that's a pretty reasonable answer to me. I wonder, and I can occasionally be worried about things like privacy and security and compliance. I'm a pretty kind of that kind of guy.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but here we go. So the question for me is then, at what point does this become a bit like building any other software where 6 months down the track, some random use case delivered a fringe, kind of thing that no one thought about. and you end up with the leak, with the spill, whatever it happens to be. And I don't know. I just think it's interesting to think about. Number one, and number two, it's sort of and anything that you put on the internet, there's going to be people out there determined to break it, and they will find a way to break it.
They will. I mean, but the thing is, there are, yes, and I think we have to take this into design. As we go through all of this, how do we, what's the safest thing we can do? And even like I was just having a conversation earlier today about MCP and the integration standards and that are evolving, and the fact that Entropic built that MCP protocol, but then came back 6 months later and went, this is okay, but oops, you better be careful because here are the security issues with it, because there are a lot. And the way around that over time is that we move from continuous integration to a dynamic integration that says this agent has access to these tools, and when it needs them in the right context, it uses them, but then it breaks that connection until it needs them again. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but you get the idea, right? That we have dynamic integration platform that does use some type of MCP, because the protocol itself is fine, it works, but what you have to do is figure out ways to build safety into it so that you don't have the same level of risk. And I think that's true with persistent memory. What are the things you want it to remember? What are the things that you don't? That's fine. But then how do we know that we built the perimeter to protect that? I was working with a startup that is doing, red teaming type software at the language model level. So that's one of the things they're talking about. Was an interesting conversation with the founder last week, actually, about they want to run some tests of, could you actually just build this red teaming capability and security model at the language model level? And if you did that, then do you eliminate a lot of those upstream risks?
Curious. Yeah, good questions. I don't know the answers, obviously. I wish I did. I suspect far richer than I am at the moment. But it's kind of funny, because it brings me to kind of so Michael, the audience doesn't. I haven't done any predictions this year for lots of different reasons. So I was furiously scribbling away on my wee tablet as I was getting ready for chatting with you today. And there's sort of two that came to mind.
Is that paper? I didn't know people still had that.
No. This is one of those remarkable things.
Oh, it's remarkable. Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Good. I have my little remarkable right here. So
indeed, you went for the right color. I like that. I like the blue.
Oh yeah, the blue is good. I like.
It's one of the things. If you really knew me, everything I've got is pretty much. I like blue. I don't know why. But it's interesting because I was scribbling down. There's two kind of angles I could go on this one, in terms of what I thought there might be some predictions around, and it's a bit bland to start with, but it'll get more interesting. I promise. Bear with me. So I still think there's two huge challenges around all of this, which is the proving the return on investment. And then the data management, quality, engineering side of it all. I don't think either of those two are going away in 2026. What's interesting is, on the data quality side of it, I actually wonder to what extent you're going to start getting historic data quality issues contributing to output issues in future, right? So back to your example, we had a conversation with the machine about your book in chapter X. What happened if it hallucinated something randomly? You happen to miss it at the time. And then you go off and you create something, 6 months later, 12 months later, where I certainly know that my memory isn't perfect at that point. And it kind of then spits out something from memory, which was a memory of something that did happen, but it wasn't the right thing to happen.
No, I hear what you're saying. It's interesting because the more I've used this to get in to get the language model in the right context and relevant to whatever it is I'm working on, and memory, and the content that is available. I I've had less and less hallucination issues, and I suspect that when you and actually it's interesting. I just wrote something about this a few days ago about the difference in enterprise AI over publicly available language models.
Mhm.
Because yes, the language model chatbot experience, it can hallucinate. It hallucinates way less now than it did 2 years ago, by the way. I mean, way less. But it doesn't matter. It still will if you aren't careful. But when you put it in an enterprise context with systems around it, and you're providing a memory, you're providing guardrails, you're providing security, all these things, it hallucinates way less to maybe not at all. And that's because it has the right context, it has the relevant data in real time when you need it to have that. Now if it didn't, it would make stuff up. I mean, it's that is its nature, right? But you can guardrail that out through a lot of different use cases from what I've seen so far.
No, I think that's fair. It's one of the things where we were talked about. I remember years and years ago talking in the world of business intelligence analytics. You can make numbers dance without the business context. It's very difficult to kind of necessarily tell the accurate story. You may tell a story, it just might not be a particularly accurate one. So that's interesting. Well, let me go slightly different direction then, and this is kind of written down next to that data quality conversation in my head. And on my wheat advert here, which was, and I don't know, I cannot decide whether this is a prediction or something's already happened. So you'll tell me. Right. So I reckon that I've always thought this actually, to be fair, and I think it's this we're ripe for the next X months, year, whatever it happens to be, that someone creates some system that's so complicated that they just don't understand how it works. And it does stuff that they appreciate, outputs that they like, or some combination of systems into a bigger solution. And I wonder, kind of it's interesting to me at that point. The reason well, at least I find it interesting, and forgetting the conversation about comparing human intelligence with machine intelligence, and just call it human level intelligence, whatever, or whatever you want to. People have their own definitions, that's great. Is it at that point when we create a system so complex, with so many moving parts, that we've created something that operates in a way which is, dare I say it, super intelligent?
I mean, yes, it's possible, and I guess um, it, yeah, I mean, how what I think about super intelligence, human intelligence. Like I've said this before. I have an issue with the idea that we're trying to build machines that think like humans. Why don't we build machines that think like machines and humans that think like humans and put them together? We have something even better. So I'm not sure. I don't know what that looks like because I have some fundamental issues with the concept that AGI is the thing we think it is. So
Mm.
with that as the base, with that as a base, I guess take that for whatever that's worth. But I just think that um, I think that we have examples already, and in fact, there are things about the models that exist today that we've had to go back and go, let's make this more and more transparent, right?
Mm.
I don't know if you remember this example, but a few years ago, um, Google had built a coding engine and was using it to develop some programs, and along the way, they realized that it was doing things they didn't understand to the
Yep.
point of they simply couldn't understand. Like it was so opaque. It worked. It did what they wanted, but they had no idea how or why. So they shut it down. And that was what, 5 years ago, maybe, I don't know, maybe more. But and I think back then we hadn't we hadn't invested in all these other things that probably did make the most sense. But now the models get more and more transparent the more we build transparency in. I don't think we've necessarily gotten to the point where we've eliminated the chance, and in fact I think there are still things that the models do that even when I look at the reasoning, I'm going, I'm not sure that I understand exactly how it got all those inputs to equal the output, but the output was what I wanted. Um, so I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting problem, or maybe it's not.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? I think there's two. Yeah, I agree, 100%. I think it's interesting. You can get a whole debate about machine and human intelligence and all that kind of stuff. I think something that's really, really smart. We expect it to be really smart in some format. I think
Yeah.
forget definitions overly. It's like I can talk to this like it knows what I'm talking about, and it talks back to me in a way that I understand and appreciate. I mean, crap definition, but it'll do for now. But it's interesting, I think, and we've touched on this in the past. I think for me, it's the combination of different systems together where we start to create this thing that, look, and it may be the case that if you forensically picked it apart, you would understand how it went from A to Z or Z, depending on where you're from. And kind of accidental pun sort of intended there, I suppose, Z, Z, depending on where you're from. Anyway, so maybe you could tell that, but we're getting to the point where, there's such highly specialized technical capabilities in each different part of that process that no one person can ever sort of look across it and go, okay, okay, I understand this. This one, let me explain it to you in all of its intricate detail.
Well, so this actually leads to one of my other predictions, and so I'll go there because I think you'll like the linkage, right? And that's this idea that, and really sort of two things, but the first one is agentic AI. Now we're seeing more and more these agentic AI platforms are turning into orchestration platforms, which I think is absolutely essential. And that also leads to a new function, which I think I've probably mentioned to you before, this idea around AgentOps, or I sometimes call it AI ops, but one of our old G2 colleagues pointed out that that is a little bit confusing because the truth is the problem lies in agentic specifically, not just in AI in general, because a lot of DevOps actually covers some AI
Mm.
ops type functions, but the agent piece of it itself is a whole. So you need an agent ops function, and then we also have to have an orchestration platform that does governance and ethics and security, all those things by design, as a part of your process going into building the system versus a thing you put on top of a system you already built, which could be problematic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes. Is it so? AI, well, in this case, sorry, no, not agent ops becomes like
Agent ops.
HR for agents, right?
Sort of, yeah, because I mean, there are a bunch of HR people that reacted terribly to the idea that we needed a way to manage digital workers like we manage human workers, because a lot of them were the reaction was, yeah, okay, we're not doing that. So, which I get. I mean, that's not their function, right? But yeah, so that's exactly what I think it's basically stands in for, that concept. We need a way to define what you want the agent to do, what the agent goals are, refine those goals, do performance management, all those kinds of things that need to happen from a platform perspective, but also need to happen as a function. And that's why I think AI ops is going to be one of the hottest topics over this next year, or agent ops, because that is going to be absolutely required to coordinate and manage these multi-agent systems that are starting to grow.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll be a little bit classic in terms of who needs to be part of that party. So if you think of HR, let's remember it's HR, it's human resources. So let's talk about AR, agent resources.
Mhm.
Kind of, it's going to have to be a blend of technical expertise, of course it is, but it's also going to have to
Yeah.
be a blend of business expertise. Otherwise,
Hmm.
kind of the techie guys can't possibly know all the rules about business, and the business guy can't possibly
Right.
know all the rules about technical stuff.
Yep.
So, kind of, you heard it here first, folks. We're going to have machine resources working alongside, human
Yep.
resources with IT in the background, making all the technical stuff happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe that that hybrid function of agent ops is critical to successfully deploying these agents as they become more and more complicated. Like having an agent that schedules your meetings for you is pretty simplistic. Yeah, there are some security issues there. There's some risk, some things you have to think through, but in general, not a complicated function, right? But once you go to, using one agent's fine. If you're using 10 agents, it's 10x more complicated. Actually, maybe 20x because you know how this sort of exponentially increases in risk.
Now,
And if you go to 100 agents or 1,000 agents or 10,000 agents, eventually you're at a scale where you can't do this without a way to do it from a programmatic perspective, a platform perspective, but also you need a function, and that function will be a hybrid mix of digital supervisors and human digital supervisors. Boy, that wasn't confusing at all, was it?
no. No, I think you're on the right path. It's interesting as well because you think about it. The minute you start adding more than one agent, right, you're into the case. Well, what if that agent interacts with this other agent in this use case, and then this other use case over here? This one interacts with those two over there, and blah 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 blah. Then, of course, you've got the unintended consequences, and so on and so forth. And it starts to look quite messy. It's a spaghetti junction of interactivity around business process across those agents, and a little bit to that point I was making about building a system that no one can understand. But
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows? Okay. Well, I've got. I know we are always, as always, going to run out of time. So
I mean, I could give you predictions for a long time. I've got a whole
I know
book
you
of
could. I want you to hear
couple
my one.
dozen here if you need them. I mean,
I know. I've got one. I want your opinion on. So I reckon. So you know well that I'm a fairly committed PC gamer. And as PC gamers, we're a fairly dedicated bunch, right? And we're all very obsessed about RAM prices and GPU prices and all that. Because AI, sucking all the oxygen, and in this case, the oxygen being hardware out of the not the room, the
yeah,
warehouse, I guess. So I reckon there's going to be on the jokey side a PC gamer backlash against AI. Just set, I'm calling it now. Some sort of movement, maybe. But
maybe.
more, more,
Mm,
more seriously, I do think, and I mean this, I'm really, really curious to get your view. I think that the industry generally, we've had hype at such fever pitch for so long about AI. I think we're now running the risk of running into a serious case of AI fatigue.
mm.
Uh, and I'm curious kind of what you think about that on the basis that, sort of delivery of this stuff, all good and well, is it going to still have the same AI magic sprinkled on it? Or is it just going to be, look, this is basically automation. Forget what's under the hood. It allows you to do this, this, and this.
I think that right now talking about agents, that's the hot thing to talk about. But the truth is, we're really talking about redefining the way we get work done. So the workforce, this hybrid workforce idea is the place where we're moving. But what that really means underneath that is, or over that, I guess, is that we're moving from the era of enterprise applications to the era of enterprise workflow or processes. So, and this, forever when we built applications, we built them to do parts of things
Mhm.
because that's the way you break the functions down and be able to write a usable program. You can't really write a usable program that does an entire process. It just gets to be so complex. But now you could break that workflow down into a multi-agent human system,
Mhm.
and you can do that. And I think that's actually where I think we are moving pretty quickly, is starting to think about that as, I need to get this workflow process, whatever I call it, broken up and done. And here's how I break that out. I've got these agents doing these things. I've got these humans doing these things. I've got, like, it's a whole complex system, organic almost, really. And that leads you to a different sort of thinking about this in a different way. So we're not really talking about the agents and the humans were talking about the workflow and how we get the work done.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very fair way of looking at it, to be honest. I could go all cynical on you if you like, but I'm not going to on this occasion.
Well, I will to talk about your backlash though. It doesn't. I mean, yes, I think the at least the PC gamers, us console gamers, we don't really care about it as much
Yeah,
until
we're not that
you
bothered about
figure out a
console.
way to get those agents to play the console game and beat me. Then I care about
Yeah, no, indeed, indeed. Uh, uh, I was never into console gaming. I tried.
it. I know, and I never really got into PC gaming, although I do iPad gaming. You know that, so
Yeah,
that's sort of a hybrid thing, I guess.
yeah, yeah, a hybrid thing almost. Yeah. No, I think the favorite console I ever had was probably my original Game Boy. I spent many a happy hour on that, so maybe that counts
Mhm.
as console gaming.
Yeah,
Um,
and even though I love my PS5, I admit that I probably play the Switch just as much, if not more, um, because it's portable. It's easy to take around with you, so it kind of fits into your, you know,
yeah, we'll see.
paradigm as well.
Yeah, we'll see. No, I do think. Look, kind of, we've touched on this throughout the year. I would love to see more positive use cases that aren't built around necessarily reducing the amount of human effort, because that feels to me, I can't help it. I know there's some amazing stuff going on in certain fields, medicine being one of them, for example. But in terms of kind of the everyday kind of bigger company adoption of this, it feels like a headcount story still somewhat.
It see, I think in the short term, especially in the land of we're executives and we know we should do this, we don't really know why. I mean, that's a little bit,
It's
maybe that's a
it's a
little
little harsh.
flippant,
A little
but it may be, but I mean, the truth is, you look at this, and this was, I mean, generative AI. This backlash was really visible when when generative AI came out. It was a productivity tool, right? That's all we've really talked about it as, and it's fair. It is a productivity tool. Now, when you move to agents, it's a different thing, but for the generative AI piece, it is a productivity tool. But just applying it without the necessary systems and people change around it didn't increase the productivity that much.
Mm.
And so what was happening was CEOs were running this project to say, okay, sales team, I gave you this new generative AI sales tool that lets you, you know, manage and respond faster to email or whatever. And that means you should produce 2x the revenue you did last year because it made you that much faster. And guess what? It didn't. Like, it didn't, because they didn't do a thing to help the people get there. They just simply gave them a tool and didn't show them how to use it. That is, I think, that's the risk and the issue across that. And if you get past it and you start to think differently about it, it to me it leads me to a completely different place. And I think that's it. The hybrid workforce paradigm is is all about you approaching this in a systematic way and doing the right foundation, change management training, those things as you roll that out. And that changes that dramatically.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's like any other piece of software. You chuck something, even if it's useful, at someone and say, "Hey, this is going to make your work better, faster, easier, whatever." But you then tell them how to use it,
Right.
and how they might use it in a way that they hadn't thought about previously. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Although,
Well,
what,
and the other thing is when you give employees a tool, but you don't define what you want them to do with it, they'll come up with what they want to do with it.
maybe playing console games.
I mean, they will. They will. It well, maybe, or maybe using it to hack into my iPad games or something. I don't know. But 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 the but my point is, if you don't define it, then it will be defined, but it may not be defined in a way that you really wanted it to be.
No,
So you
indeed.
have to start with the use case and work out versus start with the technology and work towards a use case.
Yeah. No, no, of course, indeed. I think that then I agree entirely. I think that's just good IT practice or good systems practice or good business practice, to be frank,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
purest sense. However, I do think that it's much harder to sell those projects. It's like trying to sell like early 2000s, trying to sell data quality projects for data warehouses, right? You want a data warehouse. Everyone wants a data warehouse. Fantastic. Do you want to invest in data quality? You have to do, and the pipeline to get the data over? Not so much. So I kind of feel a little bit like, and that's why I talk about the fatigue. I think people had tools thrown at them this year to some degree, and weren't necessarily getting an awful lot out of them. And I know, my use case is very similar to yours in terms of I use it as a research buddy. But I think a lot of people kind of go, oh no, they've installed this thing on my desktop and I don't know what to do with it. Or
Yeah.
it's annoying me. Even worse.
Well, I mean, even worse. But the other thing is, I mean, with agents, it is different, right? I mean, because if you give me a generative AI tool that I could use to answer emails, I can choose to do that or not. Like it maybe I like it, maybe I think it's stupid and I don't want to use it, and so I just don't. Nobody would know, really. I mean, I guess eventually you'd go, "Hey, why do you do half as many emails as everybody else?" But I mean, that's ridiculous, right? That's not really the way we think about work. So I think that's a difference in that and agents because you're giving an agent a goal and you expect it to accomplish that, and you're going to build in performance, analysis, review, feedback, all those things into the system. If you do all that, then it's a very different game than it is if you're just giving somebody a tool to use.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. Be interested to see what happens. All right, I think we've probably got time for one more. Go on. Where are we going?
Sure. Well, so we could. I don't know if you got something you want to share. Let's do it. Otherwise, I always have more.
Oh no, I want something that's a bit outlandish. I keep trying. I keep
Ooh,
trying with
outlandish.
they're not landing with you. I know we've had data centers in space, satellite catapults, flying bikes, self-driving sort of caravans. Kind of where's the prediction that says this thing's going to happen?
All right, so this one's on the tier 3 outlandish tier for me.
Like it already?
Um,
Yeah.
cross agent reputation systems.
Cross agent. Tell me about cross agent reputation systems.
So the idea, of course, is that if you're thinking about these as a workforce, then you need a way to identify, understand the reputation of, validate trust when you're interacting across systems, especially when you're interacting across organizational boundaries.
Hmm.
So, do I trust that your purchasing agent has the reputation, the trust, it is yours that you're buying this, widget from me using that agent? Do I trust that? Do I trust the transaction? Do I trust, all those things? So right now, I don't really have any way to establish your credentials as an agent for Tom Pringle pilot research, but I need a way to do that. And I'm going to need it more and more the more agents I have and the more boundaries I work across. And as if they're out of the same system, that's easy. When they're not out of the same system, which they won't be a lot of times, that's hard.
Hmm. Maybe we could have some more passwords. Maybe that would solve the problem.
I don't think that'll work. I
I
can't
don't.
even manage my password manager as it is. So
No, I think it's interesting because my head went to a completely different place when you said the title. I was thinking about internal use cases, kind of enterprise, right? So, for example, this agent is trusted with, kind of, for example, marketing materials. This agent is higher trust; it's trusted with financial data. this agent is highest trust. It's trusted with personally identifiable information.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, actually, because talking about that kind of hybrid human machine resources, I would imagine there will be some kind of classification
Yeah.
for that kind of thing. But we stick that one for next year as well.
Well,
Um,
I mean, the reputation system, it does cover both, right? I mean, so I was just giving you the worst case, right? That cross organizational boundary creates a lot of security and privacy and data and trust issues. But internally, that's fair. I mean, that same system would help solve that as well.
yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because, well, can you think, well, hang on a second. So let's say I'm the airline and you're buying a ticket from me with your agent, and it's got your credit card details, and it does the agent equivalent of fat fingering a trade, whatever that might be, and buys you a round the world first class open return, whatever, X tens of thousands of dollars. But actually, what you wanted was that, $150 flight down, half. Who
Uh-huh.
bears responsibility for that kind of transaction? That's an interesting question.
Well, see, I think my answer to that would be it's your agent, you own it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, unfortunately, I guess I could say, that if it tried to do that on my credit card, did it have to have the right one? Because most of them it wouldn't work.
Yeah, it wouldn't work on any of mine, so that's fine. I'm less worried about it. The fact that I don't use any
Yeah.
agents at the moment also makes it fairly risk-free. But no, it's interesting. I think right. So you can probe through all these different use cases, right? And I think it builds to a topic that we have spoken about a good amount so far this year, which is, look, whether I believe it's going to be agents or whatever else doesn't really matter. I think as we move ever more towards that kind of more humanistic, kind of not humanistic, what's human centric way of communicating with technology, I think that AI is, in its various guises, a big part of that. And the question for me, and look, I'm not going to go down the path of, kind of what's doing to work in economies and stuff like that, is, to what extent, trust is going to be super important. What extent do I trust it? And how can I then guarantee this? If it's as an agent, essentially, it's in the giveaways in the name. It's kind of representing me, right?
Yeah, it
So
is. It
yeah.
is.
So if I'm sending it off to go to my doctor's surgery to make me an appointment, do I trust it with that? I don't know. I don't know.
Mm.
And does the doctor's surgery go, oh, this is Tom Pringle's medical booking agent? I don't know, whatever. And we know it's his. It's not some other person who's hacked all
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly my point, right? So that's why I do think that is going to be an important part of that agent identity, right? Because I need a way to validate all those things that you just said. I need to know it's Tom Pringle's agent. It it is a 4 out of 5 star trusted agent. It has reputation. It has all those things that it could. It's done 327 successful transactions for you, and I can see that in the reputation system, whatever. So I
Mm.
do think I think that is going to have to happen. And it's your the internal use cases are great, and then when you get to the boundaries, it gets even more important, in a lot of ways, because I need to know that I can, that I, as a supplier to you, can trust it to do whatever it is you send it
Well,
there to do, or that you send it there to do that.
indeed, and it's the equivalent of having tokens or keys on our devices
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
communicate with our banks or credit cards or whatever it happens to be. It's
exactly.
the update version of that, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a hot topic over the next few years. And I mean, you know how this works. As soon as we get to those cross boundary issues and we start to have problems, then we're going to have to come up with a way to solve that. And that's why I put it out at tier 3, because as much as I think it's absolutely critical, I'm not sure we're going to get there in the next couple of years. We may have to, I don't know, but
So it's a big project, no matter how you look at it. My view.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, so we have definitely gone along on the time here, but I can't help but throw you one more coolest
Sure.
tech innovation. So I was interested. I saw this article, and so I pulled this up. There's an appliance company called Midea, Midea, Midea. It's a Chinese brand, but it actually a lot of times it white labels things for other brands. So a lot of the appliances and things you use aren't actually made, they're made by them and not made by the company you think they are. But they also sell directly. But anyway, there's a problem in large cities. You would know this about London. Say, New York was the example it gave in the article. You've got a lot of older buildings. I mean, in London, you've got a lot of older buildings that are way older than New York, of course. But nonetheless, you got it. And if you have some old system for heating and air conditioning, or probably don't even have air conditioners, just have some old boiler for heating or something. How do you move that into a modern system like a heat pump or something like that, right? Well, there are systems that can do that. One of them is a central system that you have to duct work and do all through. That's in an old building. I mean, that would be
Might be quite challenging.
catastrophically expensive, right?
Yeah.
And then there's things called mini splits, which they use a lot in Europe. Less so in the US, but you are starting to see them more. That's where it's like an individual room unit but you still have to install all the wiring to get it there. You have to have ventilation so it can suck the air in and out, and there's things, right, you have to do. So it's still not that cheap. Well, what if you had a unit that was like an old window air conditioner unit? You just put it in a window. Now it's bigger than it, and it's a heat pump, and it serves a certain area. And then, just like a mini split, you'd have to put another one in another part of your apartment or house or flat or whatever. And that's what they developed. They developed this thing. It looks like a big window air conditioner, basically, and it sits there, plugs into your 110, and it operates a heat pump for you in that space, whatever space it covers. Um, that would then make it, a 10-minute installation, and you're done. So cheaper, faster, and it works like a heat pump because it is a heat pump. So it solves that AC and heating problem directly,
I mean, to be fair,
assuming
that
you
sounds.
have Windows. I mean, that's the one thing that
Well, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that most people have Windows, and it's not. Yeah, no. I mean, it's interesting you say that because I mean, it sounds cool. Number one, number two. I'm looking at in our house here where what we do with I wanted a ventilation system. 'Cause I have I have allergies and asthma and stuff like that, and it was just to put everything around. It was just very, very, very expensive, and technically very
yeah,
difficult
yeah,
to do. So if there's a solution that allows me to kind of go, okay, we can trade that bit of window over there for a box. I'm pretty good with that, I
yeah.
suspect.
Yeah, and it actually only takes up from the inside about this much of your window. The
Wow.
bulk of it is outside the window because the unit
Okay.
it hangs down outside the window. So effectively, 6 inches, 8 inches, something like that of window, so that it has a way to put the air in and out because it has to do that. But other than that, I mean, most of the action happens outside the window, hanging down. So you still keep your most of your window anyway.
Hmm. All right. Well, I need to find out more about this.
Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, I'll send you the link. I'll send you the
Awesome.
link after because it is a pretty cool one. Anyway, so that is in fact more than all the time we had today. so as always, I'm Michael Fauscette,
I'm Tom Pringle.
and that's our AI Pulse for the end of 2025.
Happy New Year, everyone.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.